You are listening to the Love Unplugged podcast, episode 24. Today we are chatting all about how we can master our thoughts and practice manifestation. My guest today shares his journey to self-discovery and all that he's learned from his endless research into how our thoughts determine our behaviors and what you attract into your life. We go pretty deep, therefore today will be part 1 with part 2 coming at you next Thursday. So grab yourself a cup of organic tea and get ready to learn how important our thoughts are in living our best life. You are listening to Love Unplugged, a podcast focused on love in all its forms. I'm your host, Jessica Frigon, hopeful romantic and founder of Project Love. I found that too often love is set aside or taken for granted, and we tend to forget how to care for ourselves and our important relationships in the day-to-day chaos. So let's slow down, tune in, and begin our journey of rediscovering love. From honest heart-to-heart conversations with real couples and knowledgeable guests to deep dive reviews of new products and services that will help you feel beautiful inside and out. If you're looking for relatable advice or wanting to be inspired by real-life love stories, you've come to the right place. Without further ado, let's get to it. First, I want to know how do you master your thoughts? Like, I know you've been kind of analyzing what your thoughts have been, but then how do you start changing the thoughts that you're having so that they're now realigned with what you want?
Yeah. So this is, I don't remember what book it's in, but in one of those books that I listed out, one of the 4, it talks about how mastering your thought is the hardest thing you will ever do in your entire life. Not the physical work that you're going to have to do, not the behavior stuff. Like, everything else falls into place. When you get your thinking right and you get your beliefs right, then it's not hard to go to the gym. It's not hard to eat certain things that you want to eat. Like, all of that becomes extremely easy. The problem is, like I said, we're focused on the wrong things. So the hardest thing, and where most of the time and energy needs to go in, is mastering your thoughts. And I had a really hard time with this too, because it was like, okay, I want to change my thinking, but how do I go about doing that? And the one thing that I found helped a ton was to inundate myself with people who continued to remind me about my thinking. And so for me, it was like just a commitment to the books that I'm going to read are going to talk about this idea, so that every time I read it, I go, oh, right, my thinking, okay, I need to get back on track. And then it was things like putting certain practices in my life. So having my affirmations done in the morning, having my affirmations done in the afternoon. Visualization is another big thing. And by having these certain things placed in my life, what I found is that I was more often reminded, okay, my thinking is really, really important. But at first, it's really hard, because you'll be like, okay, you'll wake up in the morning, you do your affirmations, and you remind yourself, okay, I have to pay attention to my thinking. And then 2 hours go by and you've just had the most garbage thinking ever. And you catch yourself and you go, okay, yeah, I've just been thinking about all the things I'm scared of, I'm anxious about, and all of this stuff. And then you have to get yourself back on. And most people give up at that point, because they just go, it's too hard. It's too hard to constantly pay attention to your thoughts. But I find that having the audios, having the books, building your life in a way where you're reminded constantly by this idea that your thoughts are extremely important and you need to pay attention to them, really does help you kind of begin that legwork of starting to pay attention to your thoughts. The other thing that I think is really, really important is that you need to learn how to concentrate. Most people don't know how to concentrate. And so this goes back to the idea that most people don't think. Most people don't think. And it's funny because parents say that all the time. Like, what are you thinking? Like, don't you think? Like, it's constantly a thing that parents say to kids. And the reality is that most adults don't think. They get up in the morning, they go into their routines, and they don't think. They have bad emotions. And instead of going, where's this coming from? What's going on? Wait, is this what I want in my life? If I continue this pattern of thinking, I'm going to manifest this. And most people just don't think. And so really, I think the big reason for that is that we don't know how to concentrate. It's really hard for us to focus in on one thing. And so if you've ever practiced meditation, it's the most frustrating thing ever.
Oh, God, yeah.
Because you sit down and you're trying to practice mindfulness. And if you're focusing on your breath, it's like your thought just goes off and you're like, okay, pull it back. And that's I think that's a great practice for people who have a hard time spending their day consciously thinking, is mindfulness meditation. is that you have to do the practice of teaching your brain how to focus on something. Because if you do that, if you can learn to concentrate, if you can learn to control your thoughts instead of them control you, well, then you can choose what you think all day long. And that's the difference between someone who is, going forward successfully because they have control over their thoughts. Jim Rohn makes this wonderful statement where he goes, it's not the wind that blows, but rather the set of the sail. And it goes, the idea is that like the wind blows on all of us. Bad things happen to all of us. External things happen to all of us. But that's not what determines your life. What determines your life is your philosophy and your thinking, which is the set of the sail. And so someone who is consciously aware of what they think and they're choosing their thoughts on a regular basis has set their sail in the direction of success. The person who has no control and who has a lack of personal responsibility and is always blaming circumstances and things has no control over their lives. Absolutely no control. And so where do they end up? And I think that's one of the saddest things that we have, I think, in our culture today is this idea of victim mentality. And I get the idea that we want to have compassion, but we mix up this idea that people being victims or giving people the idea that they can just sit there in a sense of victimhood is compassionate. Because victimhood in its mentality is that something externally has done something to me that I had no control over, and I have no control over what my life is now. That I'm just a product of whatever happens to me. And at that point, you lose all of your power and you lose all of your ability to navigate through your life. And so that's really what it comes down to, is that control and that personal responsibility to say, I need to start to get a hold of my thinking and my thoughts on a more regular basis.
I love that. So I have so many questions. Where do I want to start? So how do you visualize? What is your practice of visualization? What does that look like?
Yeah, that was a tough thing for me too, because I'm a perfectionist. So whenever I do something, I want it to be perfect and I want to know exactly how to do it. It's like, if I get into a job, it's like, tell me every process, exactly how I need to do it, and I'll do it. I'll be a master at it, but you need to lay it out for me exactly. And so visualization was really, really difficult because people would just say, yeah, I visualize. And I'd be like, yeah, but what? Like, what am I specifically visualizing? How do I go about it? How often do I do it? All those type of things. And so I struggled for all of my 20s to really implement a visualization practice into my life. And now I've gotten into a habit where I visualize every morning and every night. And I typically do like mini visualization throughout the day, where like I'll just get a reminder that, okay, your thoughts create your reality. What do you want? Visualize it, see it in your mind. And so it's anywhere from, if it's a financial goal, I'll imagine a certain sum of money in my bank account, right? So I actually did this thing where I have my online banking on my phone. And so I actually photoshopped the deposits in there to be the amounts that I want, so that I can get a visual image of it. And so that now when I close my eyes and I go to visualize, I can see that image clearly of that much money in my account. It's also imagining yourself what your life's going to look like once that money comes. So if there's a certain car you want, or you want to live in a certain neighborhood, or you want to be taking certain vacations, or there's certain clothes that you want to wear that represent the money, because no one really wants money. Right? Like everyone's like, I'm money motivated. No one's money motivated. People want what money will provide in terms of a lifestyle or a comfort or whatever it may be. And so I find that it's shallow to just imagine money. I think if you go to the next level and really visualize what you want your life to look like because of the money that you've now earned or whatever it may be, that's helpful relationally. So if you have some goals about how you want your interactions to be with your spouse, visualize those interactions. Visualize yourself being graceful or gracious and kind and all those things. So that's pretty much what I do. The other key thing to this is any practice that you start. I used to make the fatal mistake of going way too much, way too soon. So it's like, I'm going to visualize 30 minutes in the morning, in the afternoon, and at night. It was like, it's too much. Like if you've never visualized, that's going to be way too much for you. So I started off and I said, look, I'm just going to spend 2 minutes. I'm just going to pick maybe 2-3 things in my life that I want to change, and I'm just going to visualize that. And then what happens is, as you get into that habit, one of the things that I love about visualization is when you're sitting there, if you're relaxed in a chair and you're sitting there and you're imagining your life, you'll start to see yourself grin. And you just, it's really great. Like, to imagine your life be the way that you want it to makes you really, really happy. And so when I did that for a minute or two, I was like, I just want to do this because it makes me feel better about myself. Jim Carrey tells a story about how he did this. I don't know if you ever saw that interview with him on Oprah, but he talks about how he wrote, I think it was $5 or $10 million, a check, basically saying that he's going to get paid for one of the films that he does, $10 million. So he kept this check in his wallet, and he would go and drive up to this rich neighborhood in LA, and with all these homes. And he would go there, he'd look at the check, he'd visualize what his life was going to look like when he's this famous actor. And he goes, at first, I just did it because my life was crummy. I wasn't successful. And this was a moment for me to just feel good about things. And then I think it was literally the date that he had written on that check. I think it was like within that year. He ended up, I think it was for Dumb and Dumber, getting paid $10 million.
Holy Hannah.
So he ended up manifesting it. But for him, it felt good to do that. And I totally get that. And so now, like, I can sit down for 20 minutes, 30 minutes and just have a visualization session. And it just feels good. But it also sets your mind really kind of like, okay, this is where I'm going. This is the direction that I'm going. And that's what Earl Nightingale talks about in this, in The Strangest Secret. He talks about how your goals and your vision for your life are the only way that you get to them. Because if you just think about a ship, if you took a ship and you sent it into the ocean and it had no destination, which is ultimately a goal, all your goal is the destination of where you want to end up. If it had no destination, you just let that ship go, where would it end up? It would end up, a derelict ship on the shore of some beach. Mm-hmm. But it's only the fact that it has a destination that it ends up to its destination. And so they did a study, I think a Harvard study years ago, where they showed that the people who set goals were something like 95% more likely to achieve them than the people who didn't. And I think goal setting is really difficult for people because they go, okay, I write my goals down, then what? They're just supposed to happen. And I think that's where most people kind of mess up this idea of goal setting, is that you set the goal and then you think about the goal. It's not that you just let it sit there on paper. You have to think about this goal every single day. And by thinking about this goal every single day, you're going to attract, like I said, the people, the books, the things that will then move you closer to that destination. You don't need to see the future. And that's what a lot of people have a hard time doing, is saying, like, well, let's say if someone wants to be a millionaire and you're earning $40,000 a year, it's like, how am I going to do that? Like, my current job isn't going to pay me that much. Like, I don't see the end. So it's discouraging. But as long as you hold that image in your mind, what you're going to find is the steps that you need to get closer are going to show up. Martin Luther King talked about that idea of, like, if you're going to drive from one state in the country to the other state and it's completely dark, you don't need to see the full road to get there. All you need to see is 100 feet before you.
Yes.
That's it. That's all you need to see. And as you drive, the road will reveal itself. And that really kind of puts it in your mind. Okay, yeah, but you still need to know where you're going, though, right? You still need to know that you're going from California to New York.
You don't need to
know exactly
how you're getting there.
Exactly.
It's a lot of people get overwhelmed, and the harder you make it for yourself in trying to figure out yourself how you're going to get there, I think that's kind of the block for a lot of people that stops them from even going down that road.
Yeah.
I was listening to this book, and she was saying, I don't remember her name. It was a while ago. You have the best memory. I don't know how you remember all these names and the details of these books and when they were written.
Conditioning. I've read them so many times. Yeah.
I need to practice that memory. But she was saying how you don't need to figure out how it's going to come to you. You just need to focus on the actual thing that you're wanting in your life, and it will present to you usually in a way that you didn't even think could happen, or you didn't even think was a possibility, or that maybe was not even part of your life at that time. So be open to, like, how the $250,000 came out of an area that you weren't even aware was there.
Exactly.
You didn't even see it as an opportunity or an area that could give you that kind of money. So it's not focusing on the end result, like how to get there. It's keeping that in mind, but just taking it step by step and then being open to what life is going to bring to you.
And I think, it's really difficult for a lot of people to focus on the end goal. And what happens is if you can really get a better understanding of why that's important, how it works, then focusing on the end goal long enough provides the evidence that you need that it works. And I think that's where most people give up, is that they practice these things for a few weeks or even a few months, and then they don't get the results, and then they stop. And it's like my journey with personal development. It's like, what if I would have given up? What if I would have just said personal development doesn't work? Reading the books doesn't work. Listening to the seminars and the audios doesn't work. I wouldn't be where I am today. And so I think when it comes to your thinking and when it comes to visualization, you need to practice it enough, give it a chance. And one of the things I did for myself was I'm going to give myself 90 days. I'm going to give myself 90 days and I'm going to put everything that I can into just focusing on my thoughts. I'm not going to distract myself with anything else. And if it doesn't work, then, at least I've given it a good enough time. The crazy thing is that it took way less time than I thought it would. And when I started to really make a commitment to this, it was like things started to manifest and things started to show that I was like, okay, that's the evidence that I needed to make this easier. And then you do it more. And then it's the idea of success breeds success, right? It's like once you get a little bit, it's easier to then do it. Thing like you go to the gym and you lose 5 pounds. It's like, okay, well, now that I'm seeing results, it's easier for me to get there. And so I think if people could just dedicate themselves to a single purpose, I think that's another thing that's really hard to do is I think we're doing too much in our lives. I think we're trying to, I used to set goals, like 7 different goals for 7 different areas of my life. It's like your brain's not designed to take on that much. This idea of, focus is so important. And so for me, it's like, I won't try and tackle more than 2 to 3 things at a time in my life. And I just try and focus on those 2 or 3 things. And you prioritize. And for different seasons in your life, it's different things, right? There was a period in my life where it was like, my relationship with my wife was falling apart before we got married. And we had a terrible relationship. It was just like, my wife, when we were dating, broke up with me 4 times. And I guilted her in staying with me, which she's glad now that she did. But at the time, it was kind of like, oh, this guy, I can't get rid of him. But I wasn't the person that I am today. But anyways, we stayed together. And for the first probably 1.5 years or 2 years of our relationship, it was like we fought every day. It was miserable. We couldn't find anything good about each other. It was horrible. And then it was that whole idea where like, okay, I don't really care about anything else in my life. I'm going to focus on this relationship and focus on, once again, not trying to do things. It wasn't like, okay, I need to get her flowers and I need to do that. It was like, what do I think about my wife? Right? Like, what do I think about her on a daily basis? And when I looked at it, it was like, I kept looking at all the bad things. And a lot of it, honestly, like whenever we have problems with people or external things, it's really because you're not willing to take responsibility for your own happiness. That's what I found personally is like, I was looking at her and going, you need to do this. And if you don't do it, then I can't be happy. And so you're angry at the person and you're resentful and all these things kind of come out of it. And so it was kind of this weird moment where me and my wife made a commitment to each other one day where we realized we're not going to be the source of each other's happiness anymore, which is very bizarre in this day and age because relationships are supposed to be the source of your happiness. It's supposed to be one of the main places where you become happy. And so it's like, if you ask someone, why do you love this person? They'll go, oh, because they make me happy, right? Like that's just the normal thing that we hear. And what I found is that is probably the most dangerous thing you can do for a relationship. Because if you make someone the source of your happiness, that's a lot of pressure for any human to carry the weight of. And so that's what we were doing to each other. We were looking at each other and going, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, then I can't be happy. And so now there's all this contention, all this fighting going on in a relationship. And so we ended up hearing, once again, it was Jim Rohn who made this statement where he was doing a seminar and he goes, in order for a relationship to work, what does the percentage need to be in order for you guys to have a successful relationship? Is it 50-50? Like, what is it? And so people were like, oh, it's 50-50. Both people need to give equally in order for a relationship to work. And then one person was like, no, it's 80-20, right? There's always got to be one person who's kind of leading and whatever. And so all these ideas came out. And then he came out and said, no, it's 100% zero. It's that you need to be willing to put into a relationship 100% because that's what you do with people that you love. And that's what you do when you've taken care of yourself. When you've taken care of yourself, you have 100% to give. But if you're waiting for that person to give 50 so that you have 50 to give, you're never gonna find that moment. And so he ended up saying this one thing, and me and my wife adopted it, and it revolutionized our relationship. And it was, I'm going to take care of me for you, and you take care of you for me. It's not just you take care of you and I take care of me, but it's I'm taking care of myself for you, and you take care of you for me. And not we're going to take care of each other because that's too much weight. Sometimes I have a bad day and I can't take care of you. Now what? Now we're fighting. So prior to this philosophy shift, and once again, it's thoughts, it's ideas, it's beliefs. This was a belief that we had to shift from going, I believe that you're here for my joy, to I'm here for my joy, and now I can give you joy. The great thing about this when in a relationship is now whatever the person does is icing on the cake. Now they add to your joy. They're not the source of your joy. That changes the dynamics in a relationship unbelievably. So we went from fighting every single day to now we maybe fight once a year, maybe once a year. Doesn't mean we agree on everything. We disagree. But whenever we disagree about something, I go, why would I be mad at you for it though? Like that you have no control over me. You have no control over my emotions. I'm responsible for how I feel. If I don't like the way something's done, I'll give you a great example. So like I like a really clean home. And so before my idea of a relationship was if I come home and my wife's a stay-at-home mom, if I come home and the house is messy, it's her fault. She's at home, like
clean up.
Like that's your job. Your job is to make me happy by cleaning up, right? That's something that I need. And your job is to do that for me. And with this new philosophy, I go, no, if I want the house clean because it makes me happy, clean it. So if I come home and things aren't in order the way that I wanted to, first thing I do, give her a kiss, attend to the kids, and then I go do whatever it is that I need to do to make me happy. And then there's no weight on her. There's no pressure on her. And it's this unbelievable weight where it goes, okay, now I can really serve, love, be gracious, take care of. And it's unbelievable when you stop focusing on the negative things that this person isn't doing for you, and you take responsibility for it, that you can start to think about all of the wonderful things about them. And as you do this fascinating thing happens with humans where when you appreciate them for what they do well, they do more of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like just
it's true. Makes you want to do more.
What a crazy idea, right? That like when someone praises you and goes like, oh, I really appreciate that you wash the dishes, that they're like, oh, I want to do that for you more often. Anyways, that was
appreciation.
That was a complete tangent on.
That's okay. I could see you light up talking about your relationship. So could definitely go down that road and make it like a 4-hour session, but I won't do that to you because I know you have to get home to your kids.
That's right.
But to wrap up, I kind of want to know all this journey, everything that you've been on, how have you ended up? What success have you kind of learned or experienced now with everything that you've gone through?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first and foremost, I think when I was in my 20s, everything was about money and everything was about achievement in terms of career and finances and all of that. And I think as I've just turned 30, and so I think kind of in my late 20s and after having a marriage fall apart and kind of just reflecting back on my life, I realized how my relationships are just the most important thing to me. And so that's why I said when they asked me, what is your greatest accomplishment? Like I sincerely meant like getting my wife to marry me was my greatest accomplishment because that's the person who I share most of everything that I have. And like, why do I have a career? It's because I want to provide for her and I want to create a lifestyle for us to experience together. It's like there would be no reason for me to be so ambitious if I didn't have anybody to share it with. And so I think, I would not have the relationship that I have with my wife today if I did not go on this growth of this journey of personal growth. It's absolutely revolutionized my relationship. And I was the boy growing up who at like 10 years old was imagining his wedding and like having kids. It was a very bizarre thing.
Wow.
None of my peers were thinking this way. So, family and marriage has always been a very, very important thing to me. And that's why it was so hard to want to have a successful relationship and then to have it fall apart. It was like, I wanted it so bad, but I just didn't have the tools or the resources to be able to make it work. And so being able to go through what me and my wife have gone through, that terrible first few years, the multiple almost breakups, and then to be where we are now, we always look at each other and we're super grateful. But once again, it has nothing to do with us being like these really remarkable, fantastic people. It's just there's some very simple principles about thinking and philosophy that just changed our life. Like that was one idea. Like that one idea of like, I'll take care of me for me and you take care of you for you. Like, it's just all it takes is one idea to change your life. And I don't think enough people really realize that. Otherwise, there'd be way more of a curiosity and kind of a thirst for wisdom. And I've always believed that it doesn't matter what you want in life. There's someone who's done it and there's someone who will teach you how they thought about whatever it is that they did, that you can learn and that you can change your thinking and you can achieve. And so the thing I'm most proud of is the relationship that I have with my wife. The second thing is the relationship that I have with my daughters. I think with all of the personal growth, I've really, like before I used to be really scared. I used to be very scared that I was going to turn into my dad. I used to have this really like unhealthy fear of death where I would be scared to have moments with my daughters because in my mind, I would paint this image of me dying and then my kids remembering these moments with me and then being very, very sad that they had them. Very bizarre, right? Like just a horror. So I'd like think about doing an activity with my daughters and then I'd be like, we'd have such a good time. But I'm like, I don't want to do that because what if I die? And then what if they have this memory and it's this horrible experience for them? It was just like so traumatic.
Wow.
Yeah. If you were in my mind, like 5 years ago, is a really crazy place to live. It was like the things like my mind. So like I suffer from anxiety, like crippling anxiety, and so one of the things that I do, and I've really gotten far away from it, is catastrophizing. Right? It's like every interaction or every thought, you think the absolute worst is going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's what that is, right? Like here's an interaction with your child. And instead of going, this is going to be great, it's going to be a great memory. It's like, what if I die? And then they're traumatized for the rest of their lives because they had this wonderful moment and their dad's not here anymore. Like, what is that?
They can never do what they did with you because it's too much of a trigger.
Yeah. It's just like, oh my gosh. So a lot of working through that has created a better relationship with my daughters because now I'm there. And I think too, like as a parent, it's really hard too because your kids demand so much of you, right? They demand so much of your time and you get home from work and you're stressed or you're overwhelmed or whatever it may be. Now you have this little human who's like, give me attention. And so I think proper thinking once again is so important to have the right thinking around your parenting. When my wife met me, I had already had 2 kids. And one of the things that she said to me was, she's like, I love how intentional you are with your kids, that you think through things, like you think through the interactions that you have with them. You just don't kind of take what your parents did and just go, that's just the way it's done. You just don't look at what other people do and go, well, I guess that's just how it's done. And so it's just that idea of intentionality. And once again, the idea of being an intentional parent came from Andy Andrews. And this idea that it's like, you need to think through what it is that you're doing with your kids. Don't just act or react to them. So like an example that I give for intentionality is like, when my kids are struggling with something, the typical thing you do is you just tell them to not do that, right? Like they're being selfish. And so you go, stop being selfish, right? Like share. And that's it. That's the extent of kind of your parenting. Mm-hmm. And I kind of looked at that and I went, that doesn't seem to work though, because my parents used to do that to me all the time. Like just stop it and do this. Why are you being so selfish? And then it was kind of like, okay, how do I parent in that moment? And that led to this whole wild idea that, once again, conditioning. Like, if you tell a kid they're selfish, if you're being selfish, you're conditioning them that they're selfish. And what are they going to have to behave like? A selfish person. And so now you're kind of chastising them for a behavior that you've conditioned them to be. Jordan Peterson talks about this idea that don't let your kids do anything that will make you hate them. Right? And parents will look at their kids and they'll often go, why are you like that? Oh, like my mom would say that about my sister when she was struggling in her early 20s. Like, I don't understand why she's like this, why she does this. And I'm like, because you let her. As a parent, you allowed all the conditioning to go into her mind so that she now is this person. She has these beliefs. It's the stuff you let her listen to. It's the stuff you said to her. You were responsible. That's what I always think about when I think about my children is I'm responsible to shape a human mind. Like that's what I'm here to do. And so be careful what you say to your kids. And so instead of saying, stop being selfish, share, it's like, you're behaving in a selfish way, but you're really selfless. You're a really selfless person. And so how would you want your sister to treat you? And walking through that process with a kid. And often we think, well, kids, they can't take that far. And it's unbelievable the conversations I've had with my daughters. They're 9 and 8 now. And the conversations I would have with them at 5 or 6, like that, like treating them in a sense like an adult and working through this in this process. It's unbelievable. When I had this realization, my daughters, they're kids, they act in selfish ways. And I kept doing that and it wasn't changing anything. And I did this where every time they would behave that way, I'd go, that's not who you are. You're a selfless person. And I would just affirm them in that way. Within 3 weeks, it was like they were getting water for each other. Like we would set the table and then my eldest daughter, Sienna, would be like, Nate, do you want some water? And I'm like, what 7-year-old does that, right? Like that's ridiculous. Like these aren't normal things. But it's that idea of intentionality and like thinking through these things instead of just behaving. And so I wouldn't be the dad that I am without the personal growth and all of that information. And then I wouldn't have the relationship that I have with my parents. When my sister died, it was just a tragic, horrible thing for everyone. But everyone kind of just blamed everyone. It was like, you should have been a better brother to her. And I was like, you should have been a better dad. And if you weren't an alcoholic and if my mom wasn't like, right. So everyone's just blaming everyone for why this person's life ended up the way that it was. And so like I had a bad relationship with my parents, through my 20s and up until that point. And then when my sister died, it was like, I cut ties. I was like, I'm not talking to you guys ever again. And without personal development, I wouldn't have learned the simple principle of personal responsibility. And I'm a firm believer that personal responsibility is the foundation of all success. Relationally, in your business, whatever it is that you want to see in your life be successful, if you do not take 100% responsibility for absolutely everything, doesn't mean that the things that people do to you, you're responsible, but how you react and how you then think about that so that you can move forward is your responsibility. If you don't understand that basic principle, good luck. You can try and do all the things in the world in terms of methods and all these things. You're never, ever going to be able to move forward without that personal responsibility. And so for my dad and my mom, it was like, I kept blaming them. I kept saying, my 20s were so difficult because you guys couldn't figure it out. You guys couldn't give me guidance. You were this, you were that. And it was like, I couldn't move forward in my own life because I was bound to the fact that until they apologized, or I don't even know what it is that I wanted them to do, right? It's like, even if they apologize, I'm still stuck with what they did. And so, I think it was just this moment of realization where I sat my parents down one day, and in particular my dad, because that's where a lot of the trauma came from. And I just said to him, I said, I don't need an apology from you. I don't. All I want to do is I want to, for the last time, just express how I feel. I want to express the trauma that I went through. I don't expect you to apologize because even if you do, that's not going to change what's happened. And really at this point, I'm taking responsibility moving forward. And so I kind of released him. And instead of every time we interacted, me being like, yeah, but you did this. And yeah, but, remember this time and all that, I just let it go. And I was like, you know what? I need to move forward. And from that day on, me and my dad have been able to develop this really wonderful relationship. Like my dad never gave me hugs, never gave me kisses. Anytime my dad sees me, he gives me kisses and he gives me hugs. And so like the reconciliation that happened is unbelievable. But once again, in my mind, Karim before was like, until he steps up because he's the parent, this relationship isn't going to be anything. And it wasn't until I said, no, I'm responsible for it. I'm going to love him. I'm going to be gracious with him. I'm going to forgive him. I'm going to move on. That it freed him. And my dad had a horrible time trying to like ever admitting anything that he did wrong. Anytime you'd call him out on something, yeah, no, that never happened. Or yeah, but Karim, my dad did way worse things to me. Like it was that type of, like he just could never own it. Yeah. And the moment I released him from it, it was like he would come to me and be like, I was just thinking about how terrible I was to you. I was such a bad dad. And I was so horrible to you. And it was this weird thing where like he started to do what I wanted. But now that I've let it go, I didn't want him to do that because I was like, Dad, let it go. Like, I don't want to see you suffer for something that you did 10, 15 years ago. So it's like, I didn't even want him to get into that state where he was so down on himself and felt so bad about himself that he was apologizing to me. And so that shift completely happened though, because of this idea that I need to be responsible for my life and I can't blame my parents anymore. And then I guess finally would be my career. Once again, I think the foundation of that was personal responsibility, was that if I didn't like the amount of money I was earning, that no one's holding me hostage at the current job that I'm doing. I can go out and create whatever it is that I want. If it's a job, then it's a job. If it's a business, then it's a business. But I don't need to stay here. And so from, doing difficult things like getting that cold calling job, which then led to what I do now, all of the personal development has allowed me to do things that most people would probably find difficult. But that's it. It's like as you grow, what's hard for a baby is not hard for an adult, and it's because of the growth. And in the same way, it's like a lot of the things that you find difficult in your life now is because you're emotionally a baby, or, you're, in your thinking, you're still an infant. And it's just a matter of growing past that. And once you do that, you start to find that life can be pretty wonderful, pretty beautiful, and pretty easy and effortless.
Wow. I can personally vouch for your success at work. You've definitely achieved great goals here, which is awesome. So what you're doing is working. It's definitely working. So thank you so much, Karim, for taking the time to share this amazing story, but as well giving us such valuable advice on how we can manifest great things in our life and how we can change the way that we're thinking so that we're attracting those things. It's definitely been eye-opening for me.
I'm glad. It was a pleasure being here.
And congratulations on your first podcast episode. I'm Jessica, and thanks for tuning in today to Love Unplugged, the podcast. If there are any questions or topics you'd love answered on the show, head on over to www.projectloveco.com and share your request with me. If you haven't yet, go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast and share it with a loved one. Your feedback means the world to me, and the community we've created is what fuels our discussions here. After all, this is all for you. Join me next time for another unplugged conversation.